Alright, good afternoon everyone. Welcome to today's Sec 4 E-Math lesson with me, Teacher Jason, as usual at 2 p.m. Alright, so let's get started as usual. Coming back up and let's go. Okay, so again, certain things I want to go through. Again, just be patient and understanding, observe gracious and respectful behavior, even in digital space. And lastly, if you have any good and relevant questions, please message the moderator. And yes, it is in recording. Alright, so again, the focus for today will be on paper 2. Alright, so the same set, but in this case on paper 2. So what are the different focuses between paper 1 and paper 2? Now I realize in this case the number of marks and the times remain unchanged, just that there will only be 9 to 10 questions of varying marks and lengths. So that's something for you to take note of. Lastly, what happens for paper 2, usually the situation is the last question is based on the real world scenario, which is in this case not the case for this lesson, alright, because we will be only going through the first half, so you will not see the last question. So if you want to see the last question, stay tuned for next week's lesson. Alright, but just in case, just to get a heads up for the people today, alright, I will launch a traffic light feedback. So just give me a heads up to whether you have done the paper or not, so that I know whether I should extend the time before I start the lesson. Okay, green, alright, so green actually means you have done the paper, red means you have not. Alright, so with the participants here, I'm going to launch the feedback now. Just give me a heads up too. Green means you have done the paper, red means you have not. Okay, so I have one more. Whether you have attempted the paper or not, just let me know. Okay, green means you have done the paper, red means you have not. Okay, so just let it run a little bit more. Again, for those who have come in, I don't know whether you can launch the feedback. Green means you have done the paper, red means you have not. Alright, so just to get the heads up. Okay, yellow means half. Okay, why do I have yellow? Okay, never mind. Okay, no worries, alright. Okay, so don't worry about it. I guess for certain BQs, depending on the working style, I will extend, in this case, the particular timings as accordingly. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, let's start off with the mock paper question 1. Alright, so again, as usual, certain papers will be of the work example style, certain questions will be of the work example style, certain questions will be of the bubble question style. Alright, so we'll get on to it and let's get started. Okay, now, first standard question, alright, question 1A part 1. This is actually a simultaneous linear inequality question, alright, so how we will solve it? Firstly, we'll break it up into our two inequalities. And therefore, what we do, usually we'll just break them up separately. So in this case, for this part, just take note over here, okay, that involves some negative signs. So when we involve negative signs over here, certain things to take note. 1, always remember when we do these variables on the left, constants on my right. So what we'll do over here, variables on my left, constants on my right. First things first, okay, we flip it such that the variable is on the left, but we have not multiplied with the negative signs. So the second step over here is to multiply the negative sign so that this thing flips. Okay, the first one over here is to ensure that the variable gets to the left. Second one, I flip the inequality. Okay, next one over here, similar notion as such. Alright, you are just going to divide as such again, but this time we are skipping one step because the variable is already on the left. So all we need to do is just divide, in this case, by my negative 1. Okay, divide by my negative 1, and therefore in this case my inequality flips. All we need to do in the end, don't just solve both inequalities and say, okay, you are done, let's get the answer. No, this is 2 marks. So the first mark is to show this bulk over here. Alright, so the first mark is to actually show this bulk that you have both sides. Okay, this is 1 mark. And lastly, you have the answer mark over here that gives you the inequality. Okay, so just take note, M1, A1. So that's the notion over there. Okay, so I hope you get this down. Along the way, you have any questions, feel free to type it out. Okay, this is 1A part 1. Next one, okay, quite straightforward. 1 mark, you have the inequality, draw it out. Okay, again, just to recap over here, the inequality we have is negative 3x, okay, to 2. So therefore, in this case, negative 3 is with the strict inequality. So therefore, it should follow with a hollow dot. And lastly, with the equality sign over here, okay, not string inequality, so therefore with a, in this case, not so hollow dot. Not so hollow dot, it's a solid dot. So therefore, in this case, string inequality, hollow dot, not string inequality, in this case, solid dot. Something to take note over here. Okay, so this all should be fine. Okay, let's move on over here. 1C, okay, find the value of A. So you realize the first thing when it comes to indices question, alright, is always to take note, how do we ensure that we can get to the same base? In this case, for 2, for 4, we know the common base is 2. So therefore, what we do is, okay, we will manipulate, and in this case, get to this particular statement over here. Okay, to make sure that we are able to get to the common base. So again, first up is just adding up. These are all the same, so therefore, there is going to be 4 of them. And therefore, next step is to convert everything to the same base. Alright, key points to take note. Everything to the same base over here. And with the indices law, we know we can add them up. Okay, if we multiply, take note, it's not 4a, it's going to be 2a plus 2. So that's where we get the powers over here. And since they are the same, we are going to form our linear equation over here. Okay, linear equation over here. And therefore, solving it, this is our answer. Okay, so bring it down to the steps. So that's what we have. Okay, any questions along the way? Feel free to ask to know how we get the marks as such. Okay, last part for this question 1. Alright, just take note, it's your quadratic equation. And we know when it comes to quadratic equations, they will not usually test on factorization, because mainly that one, it's a little easier. They will want to actually make you harder to solve, which is in this case, how do we complete the square? Alright, so just click the options, but in this case, I would extend just 30 seconds for those who need to attempt to complete the square. For those who have attempted the paper, thank you very much. Alright, just wait a little while. I wait for 30 seconds. So I'll launch the bubble launcher in exactly 15 seconds at 2:07. Alright, so for those who have done it, the paper, thank you very much. For those who have not, alright, just make sure it is at your side. Okay, I'm going to launch it in about 8 seconds. Okay, I'm going to launch it now in 3, 2, 1, let's go. Alright, let's see the responses over here. Awesome. Alright, seems like everyone can do this. That's good. Okay. Alright, that's good. I have 9 people that have attempted this accordingly. Alright, that's good. Take note. What do we do over here when we complete the square? Okay, so one good thing we can take note. Okay, 1 second. Okay, so most of you got it down, very good. But okay, certain mistakes that can happen when you complete the square is 1. Alright, when we actually complete the square, so that means we have x squared minus 7x plus 11. Alright, when we are actually doing this, first thing, we need to divide the coefficient of x by 2. So what am I saying is this coefficient. Okay, thereafterwards, we are just copying x minus 7 over 2. So this is the result of what happens when you divide by 2. Thereafter, what happens? Okay, don't just divide by 2, you also need to subtract with it. Minus 7 squared. Okay, this is also the case regardless whether the sign here is minus or plus. This is always going to be a minus sign. And thereafter, okay, leave the 11 out. So, moral of the story, this whole thing over here is just this part over here. Once you have that, all you need to do, add them all together, and this gives me x minus 7 over 2 square. Adding these two together, then this is then none other than negative 5 over 4. And this is my answer. So number 4 is my answer. So for those who answered 1, 2, and 3, you might have forgotten to divide the coefficient of x by 2, or you might have done plus 7 over 2 squared instead. Alright, so instead of minus, you did plus. Okay, this is not correct. So just something to take note. Okay, so I believe everything is okay up to so far. So let's bring on to the next part first, 1D part 2. So 1D part 2, hence when we solve, means we actually have to use the previous part. If we actually use the quadratic formula straight, okay, if you use the quadratic formula in this case to solve this question, Okay, yes, you will get the answer mark. In this case, answer mark over here, number 1. You will get the answer mark. But you will not get the full marks even though they are correct because of what word? Can anyone tell me over here? Okay, I know this is quite straightforward, but what is the word over here that the question emphasizes? Very good, Isabel. Anybody else wants to try? This word over here may seem very insignificant, but when put in a mathematical context, very good, Denise. Okay, I think you guys got it. This word over here. So when this word over here comes up, you have to use the previous part, which is what we have done over here. Okay, so the previous part. So by part 1, we know we actually have to use this one. So that's the first mark they want you to see. That's the first mark they want you to see, because they want you to see whether you understand the notion of hence or not. So mark number 1. Then after that is the manipulation, whereby you manipulate till you can get the expression over here. Okay, so that is how you get the 3 marks. And if you use the quadratic formula, as I said before, you will not get any marks because of the word hence. Okay, so this is the notion over here. Lastly, what happens, what they can test you for complete the square as well is, very commonly, the minimum point. Alright, so in this case, 30 seconds, actually, I will just write down what is the notion first before I launch, because in 30 seconds, okay, if your concepts are there, you can definitely actually solve this in 30 seconds. Alright, so let me just write down the expression. For those who have done the paper as well, just bear with me, alright? While I write out this expression over here before I start the marble launcher. Alright, I will start it right now in 3, 2, 1, again, let's go. Okay, this can be answerable in 30 seconds, so let's just see what we have over here. Okay, responses are going good for the rest. Okay, this can be answerable in, answerable in 30 seconds. Okay, that's good. Okay, last 5 seconds. Okay, seems like most of you got it down, but and again, I am a little bit, let me check the response. Okay, most of you got it down, that is good, but some of you have some mistakes in terms of identifying the turning point, regardless minimum or maximum in this case. Okay, so minimum or maximum point, okay, in this case, the minimum point, we are always just taking the the numbers over here. So the first number we are taking is just this particular number over here, 7/2. So regardless whether the sign over here is plus or minus, it is always going to be just that particular number that we are taking. Okay, so in this case, my minimum point, it is just going to be none other than 7/2. But whereas the next one, it is dependent on the sign, because that is the result of the number where you sub in the minimum point. So if it's minus 5/4, it will be minus. Okay, if you forget the sign, alright, just take note from there. So therefore, in this case, again, just to reiterate, the x value is always going to be the positive value, alright, because regardless plus or minus, that is the point that you're going to achieve. Okay, next up, what happens is that, okay, the other point, negative 5/4, depending on the sign. Okay, henceforth, then you may ask, when will the x value be negative? In this case, if I have something like this. Okay, because it will follow x minus 7/2. In this case, this is where my minimum point will actually be negative 7/2, negative 5/4. Alright guys, so that's something to take note. Okay, so any queries so far, please feel free to type it up. I'll give you about, I would say 2 to 3 minutes to ask any query, not 2 to 3. I'll give you a minute to think of any queries that we need to go through, alright, before I move on to other questions. Which part do you not understand, Chen Zheng? Which particular part? Okay, so when we talk about completing the square, right? Okay, now, when we are at this particular formula over here, let's bring it down again, okay? So, for this one, okay, the general notion of complete the square. So after you complete a square, I hope you all remember. Let me just erase this part over here. When we complete a square, okay, the result of getting the turning point is this general formula. I hope you all are familiar. Is x minus a square plus b, supposedly. This is the complete the square notion. If you have such a notion, alright, the turning point, okay, is going to be, in this case, AB. Okay, I hope this is clear to you, Chen Zheng, and for the rest who are listening as well. When this general notion comes in, your turning point, I hope you realize in this case is A and B. Okay, is this okay so far? This should be familiar to you, I hope. Is this okay? Give it some time for you to absorb. Turning point, yes. So the turning point, I would say, Jerome, is the general notion as the minimum point. It's the general notion to describe any turning points, in this case, minimum point, maximum point. So for turning point, we have two contexts. One is what we call the minimum point. The other one is the maximum point. So these two are turning points because they are essentially turning at that particular point. Okay, Chen Zheng, are you okay so far? Any other queries that I can answer? Yeah, correct. So you always copy the blue part. So if it's positive, it's going to be positive. If it's negative, it's going to be negative. But for A over here, okay, how does it make sure it's negative? Nope. Sorry, nope means what? You do not understand, or you have any questions? Or is this formula clear to you? Because this is actually touched on in Set 3. E. Yeah, E math in Set 3. Okay, understand. Turning point, yes, not over here. Because why is it not negative AB? Because when we do this over here, x minus AB, alright, is saying that my formula, take note, this is a negative sign. So negative sign, we do not plug it out. It's only when it's positive. Because x minus AB, what does it mean? Okay, if I draw out my curve in this case, okay, suppose in this case it is AB. Let's take AB to be positive in this case, and let's say it is a downward sloping curve. Y, x, and we have 0 over here. Okay, y, x, and we have 0 over here. So what happens is this. Now, turning point, how do we achieve to that extent is that we know, in this case, when we achieve such equation, okay, we are going to have my coordinates as such. And how do we achieve this? Okay, this is actually done by actually x minus ax plus b. Let me see how do I explain this. Okay, so let's say my curve is as such. Let me just see. This might bring to mistakes actually, because what happens if you actually forget to multiply by the negative sign? Okay? Double negative is positive. Yes, that might actually be clearer. It is actually correct if you use the formula, Isabel, and you copy minus 8. It is correct. But there are many instances on my side, or based on my experience, okay, whereby, okay, especially when it comes to equations, they are very long. And we know in this case, for those who take A math, in this case, when you do your integration, when your integrals are from a positive number to a negative number, you forgot to multiply the negative signs, and we know when you substitute, when you want to see your working, it's very long. So that's why in this case, turning point, it will be AB. Okay, now, okay, back to Chen Zheng's query. Apologies, I went a bit too far. Okay, now, in this case, why is my minimum point, in this case, how will it be negative? It's because, okay, let me just erase this part. Okay, suppose in this case, if I have x plus, not x minus in this case, x plus. So in this case, it's going to be x plus. Now over here, following this notion, plus over here, how do I achieve plus? As what Isabel said, double negative is positive. So if I were to branch it out, that's all I have my turning point to be, in this case, negative 7 over 4, negative 5 over 4. Alright, so that's why in my previous example, what I've stated, it will be this. Alright, is this clearer now? before I move on to question 2. Question 2 is yes. Okay, Chen, if you don't have any questions up to now, I will move on. Okay, so I will move on first. If there's anything else, then after that, there can be a substantiated Q&A session for everyone to answer. Okay, now let's move on to question 2 of the ratio question. All right, very famous ratio question. You're given a ratio, and then what happens if there's a change in the marbles, okay, change in the quantity, but the total stays the same. So what happens in this case, some of you may say, oh, I can actually draw models. But in this case, what happens, the models can be a little bit complicated if the problem arises. Sometimes it's good to stick to algebra. And what we do is we will actually fix a particular algebraic notion over here. So how to know what to fix? Depending on the question. All right. Number of marbles that Amanda have at first. So this will be the number of marbles Amanda have at first. As in this case, I cannot write 3. 3 is not the number that Amanda have at first. So I introduce a variable. I do 3x. Okay. Why 3x? Because 3 is to 8. X is some variable that I can find. And I have a new identity over here, 3x. Okay, I don't know what 3x is, but I do know that this represents the marbles. So that's why I actually write the variable as such. And henceforth, in this case, Bruce will have 8x if I multiply x on both sides. Giving this, that's where we can actually make use of this particular information here. Bruce gave Amanda 25 marbles. So Bruce lost 25 marbles. And in this case, because Bruce gave Amanda 25 marbles, that statement has two meanings. Bruce lost 25, Amanda gains 25. Manipulating it, okay, variables on the left, constants on my right, divide, I get x. Take note, x is not my answer. I want to find for Amanda's number of marbles. So that's where I multiply and to give me 30 marbles. So where do the 2 marks come from? The first mark essentially, okay, it seems very little, but it's to get the variable over here somehow or other, some x, some variables in between. Second is actually to get the number of marbles. This is 1 mark, method mark. Okay, so this is for 2a. Alright, so along the way, okay, I don't have to say Q&A for you all to answer. If you all can type it out, feel free to type it out to answer along the way as well. Okay, to ask any questions, not answer. Okay, next up, now we have the notion of 2b. This is a very interesting, I would say, currency conversion questions. Yes, ratio looks very scary. Not those kind of ratios where they ask you to convert, but if you look at ratio questions and they have a long story, chances are, Denise, alright, there's gonna be some change along the way in terms of quantity, in terms of algebra. So my suggestion is for ratio questions that involve such a long query over here and asking you to find a particular number of marbles, recommendation, let one of them be a particular variable. In this case, if it's 3 to 8, 3x, in this case, to represent the marbles over here. Okay, so use algebra to your advantage. Alright, so and then it won't be so scary anymore. Okay, next one. This is a very interesting currency question. Okay, it looks like a set 1 concept, but there's something hidden in between. Why so? Okay, they tell you in this case the laptop pricing in Singapore. So in Singapore, it sells this price. But in another country, alright, it's in another currency. It looks like I just need to subtract these two. Okay, it looks like I want to subtract these two. Alright, Denise, I'll answer your query later. It looks like I should subtract these two, but the currency is different. So therefore, in order to compare the price difference in that particular currency that we're looking for, in this case in Singapore dollars, I will have to convert this to Singapore dollars first. And that's where my rate comes into handy. Alright, so that's why all the division comes in, because I'm finding Australian dollars. So Singapore dollar to Australian dollar is this. Now I want Australian dollar, how much Sing dollar is it? Because this is in Australian dollars. If 1 Australian dollar is this amount, how much Australian dollar for 1456 is in Singapore amount? Which in this case you realize it's actually lesser. So 1456 is actually in Singapore currency 1330. So all we need to do, find the time the difference over here. 1350 minus 1330, that is $50. So that's how we actually achieve that. And back to Denise, that's how you achieve that. Okay, that's for question 2b. And back to Denise's question, what do you mean by dx? It's like dx over here. What do you mean by dx over here? Yes, so usually what happens, that can be very confusing. X is the number of marbles. I believe I mentioned that, but after thinking it through, we want to emphasize whose marbles we are actually writing out. Okay, so to improve my explanation as well, after thinking through it on my side. So it is actually better to actually say, okay, 3 is the ratio. If I multiply by x, 3x, what does it represent? So it's better and clearer for the marker to see. I hope this is clearer to you, Denise. And in this case, for the marking, for this one, this is 1 mark, difference another mark. So that's how you get 2 marks over here. Okay, so following up from here, again, question 2, I didn't go through question 2c because it's quite straightforward over there. So you can refer to the answers that should have been submitted to you, or you can ask the Genie Ask Teachers. In this case, for if you need any questions for question 2c. Let's move on to 2d over here, whereby you realize this question focuses on a particular interesting concept, which in this case, compound interest. Compound interest can have its different variations over here. So interest of 5% per annum, again the keyword is half yearly. So what happens to my interest? Okay, before that, look at the question. We need to know the principal, which is in this case 4500. Again, therefore, interest 5%, half yearly means every year it will compound 2 times. So my interest will actually divide by 2 because every year is gonna get compounded with half of the time period over here. But in this case, 3 years, how many 6 half years do we have? So that's why we need to multiply by 2. Input this in your calculator, write it in 5 to 7 significant figures over here to make sure your answer is as accurate as possible. Before, in answers, usually because we round to cents, that's why to 2dp over here. So that is the notion for compound interest. Things to take note: half yearly, how does it change the interest? How does it change the time period? Okay, lastly, alright, with this, okay, that's a comparison question. So for this one, what happens is I'm gonna leave it to you to actually find out as well. I'll just write down part 1. For part 2, you guys can get started as well. Simple interest, okay? Simple interest over here is in your set 1 concept actually. So how do we compare? And in this case, for those who have done, just bear with me. For those who have not done, I'm going to give you 1 minute. I'm going to launch the bubble launcher at 2:28. While I write down company's amount as this amount over here for you to compare. And this one is to actually show the different comparison answers and the errors in the queries actually. Okay, so I'm going to launch the bubble launcher in about 30 seconds for those who have yet to try, okay? Okay, I'm going to launch in the next 10 seconds. Okay, I'm going to launch it now in 3, 2, 1. Let's see the responses, shall we? Alright, take note. Look at the question, look at your calculations actually, before we get on to a decision. Okay, let's see the responses. Sorry for that. Okay, let me take a look. Alright, most of y'all got it down. Okay, no worries, alright, because then again, Chen, just to take note, the mock paper should have been done before that. So if you need extra time, do give me a sound out before the bubble question starts. But okay, then again, the mock paper should be done at your side. Okay, so for the next lesson, just take note to do the mock paper. Try to do most of them before we actually start the lesson. Okay, so how do we do this question? Of course, to start off, we need to find for company B. Company B, in this case, okay, we have to find the interest I. We know the formula PRT over 100. Okay, what is this equals to? This is equals to, in this case, let me just write it separately. This is equals to, in this case, my principal. In this case, over here, principal, we know is 4500. Sorry for that, I should wrote that down. 5, and how many years? 3 years. Over 100. This is then equals to 675. But in this case, what happens? This is just my interest. So therefore, if I want to find the total amount, I not only have to write the amount, I also have to write the interest, which is in this case 5175. So comparing between them, we know in this case company A will have more money. So let's look at explanations for company A. So did Ahmad make the right decision? More money he gets from company A. So the answer should be yes. 1 and 4 should be out. Okay, but what is the explanation? 1 and 4. 1 and 3 should be out first. But what is the explanation behind it? Okay, yes. So because he achieved more money in company A, right? So it should be more money at the end of 3 years in company A. The other one says what? Company B. So that's where there's the trap, and therefore this is my answer. So you have to take a look out at the explanation given to you in the questions before we get to the answer. Okay, so I hope the explanation here in the bubble question, all of them make logical sense, alright? But in this case, what happens? I just want you to take note of the phrasing of the bubble question options, and as well as take note, okay, what are the different traps and what they are looking for when you're doing the explanation. Okay, so again, I will stop here for about 2 minutes. I'll take in any questions before I move on to the third question for today. Okay, I'll move on to the next part. So any questions, I'll give you 1 minute to type it out before I move on to the next part. Or in this case, let me actually initiate a feedback. Okay, if you have any, if you are all good, please click the green light. If you have a question, please click the red one. So green and red, I should not see any yellow responses. Okay, let's go. So I think it's easier for me to see. Green means you are all good, red means you have questions and you're in the midst of typing a question for me. Okay, so as you see someone starting to type a question for me, okay, I'm expecting it to come soon. Okay, I'll wait for a little while. In this case, if no one has any questions, alright. What is IC? You mean, what do you mean by IC, Denise? Oh, you clicked wrongly. Okay, no worries. So that means everyone has. Okay, so I think no one has any questions. I'll wait for 10 more seconds for the responses to come. Okay, looks like all is good. I have all green. Let's move on to the next question, shall we? So you realize question 1 focuses algebraic, question 2 more on the money side, the red side. Alright, question 3, we are going a little bit more geometric, and that's where you have to firstly, what's the technique here to do this? 1 mark because, okay, look at the amount of marks. The amount of marks will tell you the amount of properties that you need to use. Okay. Secondly, while looking at the amount of marks, look at the angle you are finding over here. Okay, look at the angle you're finding over here. AOD, in this case AOD, okay, I should use a red color one. AOD, and in this case AOD over here is this particular angle. Thirdly, zoom into the angles that you are given. Are you able to relate any properties? In this case, if you look at the yellow highlighter one, I can use this property over here. Angle at center, which AOD is 2 times angle at circumference, which is what the given angle is at. So therefore, 44 degrees times 2, that gives you 88. Okay, so how do we tackle such questions? Number 1, number of marks. Okay, here, number of marks. Number 2, from here, we can try to see what is the angle given. Based on number of marks, angle given, we try to relate as well as last one, label the angle to be found. Okay, Three things over here. These three tips will help you to actually shorten the time and as well as help you to identify how many marks that, how do you present your answer in this case. Okay, so that's the first part. Moving on over here, if you realize, let's move on to 3A part 2. Okay, therefore this one, oh, there are 2 marks, so that means I might need a little bit more stuff to take a look at. So we know there are 2 marks, okay, so first thing, we know 2 marks, okay, so let me erase this first. 2 marks. Second thing over here, okay, let's identify in this case the particular triangle we need to look at. Okay, in this a particular things that we need to look at. Okay, so the only thing we know is that DBC is this angle over here that we are finding. Okay, DBC. And then what is the angle that might help us? Okay, the next angle that has not been given yet, 28. So let's see how we can link. We got one angle, another angle, and if you realize what are the other things that can help us solve if we actually somehow know this particular angle, if we actually identify these lines here as a shape, which in this case it's a right angle in a semicircle. So what happens? Okay, from here, what is the property? 2 marks means 2 properties usually in that case. So therefore you realize my first property comes in, oh, if I actually know this angle. But if you look at it closely, this angle is indirectly given. Because why? BDC 90 degrees, right angle in a semicircle. Then from there, what happens? We have DBC is 180 minus this angle minus the given angle. Again, you have to state the property. Very important note. Second note to take note. You have to state the property if it is given to you, if you are using it to solve your angle. Very, very important note over here. Okay, so that's why in this case, subtracting everything, that's how you get DBC is 62 degrees over here. Okay, so the things to take note again, same pointers. Number of marks, angles given, label the angle found. Number of marks, angles given, label the angle to be found. Okay, this is too long of an arrow. Okay, so I hope this is all good, okay, for everyone. And let's see how you guys use this for the next bubble question. Alright, but in this case, I will need to label more angles, otherwise it's hard for you all to do. This is angle 62 degrees, and then this is angle 88 degrees. Now this is 3 marks, okay, for those who have done, thank you very much. Just bear with me for a moment. For the other people who have not done, alright, okay, I'm gonna give you about 2 minutes before I launch the bubble launcher. And take note, the angle to be found is this angle over here. Okay, so how do I do it? Sorry, this is not the angle I'm finding. What am I doing? This is not the angle I'm finding. This is not the angle I'm finding. This is the angle I'm finding. Yep, I just realized. Thank you for the note, Isabel. It's OAX, not OAT. Yes, I have my mistaken. Okay, I want to draw a little bit nicer. Sorry for that. Okay, there we go. Okay, 1 minute left for those who are attempting before I let you key in your answers in about time. Okay, I'll launch the bubble launcher in 20 seconds time. Alright, in 10 seconds time, I'm gonna launch it. For those who are ready, get ready your hands. That doesn't sound right. Okay, get ready your fingers to answer the question. Alright, in 3, 2, 1, let's go. Alright, let's go. Okay, so take note of the mistakes that you might have made, alright, along the way. Okay, that's good. Most of you all are done. Alright, glad to see that. Okay, but take note, most of you are falling into the traps over here that I've set for the BQs, or in fact the workings. Okay, let me take a look. Let me take a close look. Okay, most of you got the answers right. Very good. But some of you have fell into the trap over here. Firstly, okay, angles. First trap I said here. This angle is not in the same segment as this one. Okay, because they are not drawn in the particular segmented way, just like this one. This one will be equals to this one. Okay, but this one is not drawn in the segment way if I were to view this shape over here. So one thing to take note. The other one, again, you assume this one is in the same segment. Yes, it is in the same segment as, in this case, DAX, but it's not OAX. Okay, so how would I solve it? In this case over here, in this case DAX, or in this case DAC, to branch it out, that is the first step that we need to do. Okay, so what happens? Okay, we can start off with, in this case, DAC. That is the first angle we need to take note, and now that is 1 mark. If you list this down, congratulations, you have 1 mark. Okay, angles in the same segment. This is your first mark. So DAC is actually this angle over here. Right, this angle over here. DAC. Then afterwards you realize, oh, I'm almost close to OAX if I can find OAD. So what happens? We know OAD over here is 180 minus 88 from the previous part, divide by 2. Okay, and take note, we have to list down the property over here because we are using two properties in this case, but this will only still give you another mark. Base angles of, in this case, my isosceles triangle, because these two are of the same length. They are the radiuses of the circle. Okay, our isosceles triangle, and in this case, angle sum of triangle over here. This is equals to 46. Now I know the first one is 62, second one is 46. Third one, to finalize and nail the full marks over here, 62 degrees minus 46 degrees, this is 16 degrees. Okay, so 28 and 62 are actually not correct because you will need to use them in order to solve along the way. Okay, so take a close look, alright, very carefully. Okay, so for those who have answered in this case number 3, you might have assumed that these two are in the same segment, but take note, the same segment is DAC, which is in fact the first step. Okay, so just take note of the segments and the particular geometrical properties that you might have taken note of. Okay, now moving on to the next one, very interesting as well, branching out from the trigo part. Okay, PQRS are points on the circle O with radius 8 cm. Okay, so calculate the major arc over here. So what happens? Again, ratio given, make use of algebra to help you solve. We know in this case this is 1 and 2, but you have to show, in this case my 2 marks, that firstly, your first mark comes into play if you were to find out after all this with the given ratio, and you let POQ be x, QOR be 2x, summing that up to give you x. Your first mark comes into play when you find the respective angle, POQ, to find the major arc. Take note, the major arc is the big arc over here. So I need the reflex angle drawn in this case, my black color marker over here, that is the reflex angle to find the blue color highlighted arc over here. The second mark comes into play when you actually use the leg of major arc to give you the formula, which is in this case 300 degrees. Okay, take note, it's not 60, it's 300 degrees. Over 360 degrees multiplied by 2 pi r. R is 8 given here. So that's how you get the first part. Okay, next part over here, let me move on. Okay, calculate the total shaded area. Now the previous part you realize will help you quite a bit, okay, because it is going to actually identify, in this case, how you would find the angles, okay, not directly the major arc, but the angles given. Because why? We can actually do this if you identify my shaded area. This is just a sector. The other one, this is the same sector, but it's just subtracted by this triangle over here. So what we need to do then over here is to find the angle, which is 120 based on the previous part. And we know the angles are the same. That's why the statement over here comes into play. To find, in this case, the total shaded area, take note, okay, the marks comes into play, not the angles, but we identify, in this case, firstly, area of sector POS identified correctly minus my area of the triangle, that's another one identified correctly. These are the 2 marks that you need essential in order to get the final mark where you essentially get the correct answer. Okay, so area of sector in this case is just your 120 over 360, the proportion, multiplied by, in this case, the area over here, pi r squared, which in this case gives you this notion, minus, in this case, area of my triangle, which is half AB, which in this case, both of them are the same, but you still have to write AB, sine C. C in this case, take note, your calculator should be in degrees, not in radians. Evaluate them with your calculator, you should get this string of numbers. Take note, don't leave it like this because this is not exact. Simplify it by rounding up or down if it's not exact. Alright, something for you to take note over here. Okay, so then again, it's up to see how we identify the shaded area by knowing whether your sectors is formed by adding or subtracting certain stuff. In this case, this is one sector. Okay, it's right on top of my head, luckily. Okay, one sector over here. And in this case, this is a section where you have the sector, same sector, minus the triangle. Okay, so I'll leave it up to here to answer any queries that can come out. Okay, I'll wait for 1 minute to... Okay, so this is for question 3 in general. I'll wait for 1 minute to see whether I can answer any queries. If there are any queries, I'll answer for the first minute. Any queries to ask, please ask ahead. Regardless of any parts, I will try to see whether I can answer them. Okay, again, let me initiate feedback actually. So, to know, green again is no questions. Red means you have a question, you're currently typing. Okay, yellow means you... Again, I only want green and red. What does yellow mean? Okay, or if you are yellow, maybe you are shy, you have a question, you want to ask it in the Q&A later. Okay, I'll wait for 5 more seconds before I move on to the next question. Okay, seems like it's good. Let's move on to question number 4. So for those who have done the mock paper, question number 4, the whole thing is on probability. So first one, very simple. Complete the tree diagram. Few things to take note. One thing, make sure your denominator stays the same on their specific branches. Okay, second thing, the probability should sum to 1. Very important, that's how you check. Okay, probability should sum to 1. Okay, in your branches. Okay, if it does not sum to 1, double check again. Okay, as we proceed from branches to branches, just take note, in this case, pick without replacement. So without replacement means your denominator, as each branches goes by, it will get subtracted by 1. So therefore, in this case over here, this one over here will get subtracted by 1. And the other branch over here as well, it will get subtracted by 1. Okay, subtracted by 1. So each of them will get subtracted by 1. By 1. Over here, and therefore again the probability of each number should sum to 1. That's very important when you draw your tree diagram. So this one minus 1, denominator minus 1 because it is without replacement, and each of them should sum to 1. So this should sum to 1, this one over here should sum to 1. Okay, so these are the few things to take note. That is your tree diagram. Okay, now with the tree diagram, what kind of questions can they test you? I have pre-drawn a tree diagram for you, alright, okay. So over here, how can we actually solve this question? 2 geography students are drawn. Over here, I think 30 seconds is enough. Let's launch it and see how we can solve. Let's go. Alright, all you need to do, identify 2 geography students and then we solve from there. Alright, 20 seconds. Just take your calculator, press it, it should be good. Take a look at the question on the context. Okay, alright, so I've most of you got it down, but I have some responses that tells me, oh, I have You read the question carefully. Now I'm reading for 2 geography students, so I am actually looking at this branch over here. Okay, so this one and this one. So therefore, 2 geography students means what? Okay, 2 geography students in this case means 13 over 30 multiplied by 12 over 29. Multiplying it then, you get this. For those who have answered the other option, you might have looked at 2 history students instead. So take note what we are looking for. Very important. Yes, it may not be that note over here, alright, okay. Paper 2 may not necessarily be harder than paper 1 may not necessarily be harder than paper 2, just take note, okay. And for Chen Zheng, alright, I will try to increase the time, but over here I need to complete quite some questions. So let's just take note over here and try to do the mock paper in the next lesson, okay, for the subsequent questions to come, alright. So I will try to bring in more time. In this case, for the next one, I'll give you 1 extra minute for this question, alright. So I'll launch the bubble launcher at 2:51 before I give you extra 30 seconds to fit in the question. And to answer Denise questions again, paper 1 may not be necessarily harder than paper 2 may not necessarily be harder than paper 1. Sorry, paper 1 may not necessarily be harder than paper 2. Okay, it depends on how they want to set it. And sometimes paper 2 can be harder because the questions are longer, so you may need to see how we actually keep in the information. Okay, I'm going to launch the bubble launcher in the next 5 seconds. Yep, so paper 1 can be easy, or if you mean this particular paper, it depends, alright? Stay tuned for the next paper coming up in the next month, launching the bubble launcher now. Okay, that's good. So take note, I want 1 student study geography, the other student study history. Oh, sorry, this is 30. Apologies for that. This is 30. Alright, carry on. Thank you for the sharp eye, Ian. Okay, time is up. Okay, so let's take a look. Apologies for the typo. It should be 30, but on your side, okay, just make sure it's 30 as well. So there are many different combinations, and one thing to take note is because I didn't specify which comes first. So therefore, it can be geography comes first, followed by history, or in this case, history comes first, followed by geography. So we know or means plus. So therefore, it can be actually this branch, or in this case, this branch over here. So therefore, we actually have to sum them together, and this results in, okay, 13 over 30 times 17 over 29 plus 17 over 30 times 13 over 29. Solving them, that's how you get answer number 4. So just take note over here, which is 221 over, in this case, 435. So that's my answer for number 4. Okay, so let's take note from there. And yes, so again, for probability, that are the different kind of questions that may come up accordingly. Okay, so that's for 4A. I'm not going to go through 4B because I feel it's quite straightforward as well. So let's move on to the last question. Question number 5. Okay, question number 5 I wish to go through, alright, okay, because it may be quite straightforward over here, even though the information can be quite confusing as such. Express in terms of x the total surface area of the cube, okay? So I hope you all realize is 6L square for my surface area in this case, and we know the length is x over here. So L is x, so therefore it's x squared times 6, 6x squared cm cube squared. Okay, so that's the notion over here. Okay, this one should be okay. That's how you get the 1 mark. That's how you get the 1 mark, and instead this should be just rather the answer mark. Okay, but for the next one, it's going to be a little tedious because when there's cube and there's description for the cuboid, that's where I want you all to do it. Okay, so this one I'm going to give 2 minutes for you all to try before I launch the bubble launcher. Okay, so I'm going to launch the bubble launcher at 2:55. Okay, so this can be a little confusing, but let's see where it can get to. Alright, so in general, I hope this mock papers that comes up for you has been going well. Okay, I hope this is actually good for your own practice. Okay, 1 more minute before I launch the bubble launcher for this. Okay, so look at the descriptions over here before you go and ask yourselves. Okay, based on this, what will be the length? Well, because it's a surface area, so that's why the formula can get very chunky. Length of cuboid, what will be the width of my cuboid, or in this case the breadth. And next one, what is the height of the cuboid? Ask yourselves this before you actually answer the question. Okay, that's a hint over here. Launching it in the next 10 seconds. Okay, what's the length based on the description? What is the width based on the description? What is the height based on the description? Launching it in 3, 2, 1, let's go. Okay, that is good. Don't get confused, alright? So most of you are getting confused by the different combinations. Last 20 seconds. Last 10 seconds. Last 3. Okay, so I would say half of y'all got it down, but the other half, just take note of the different combinations. Length of the cuboid, 20% greater than length of cube. This should be 1.2. 120% of x, 1.2x. 20% smaller, 80% of x, 0.8. Height of cuboid, 1 cm smaller. It's not multiply, it's not divide, but it is subtract. So once you get all this down, okay, so that is where we can take note, in this case, my total surface area, which is in this case 2 of LB, in this case 2 of 1.2x times 0.8x plus, in this case, 2 of 1.2x, x minus 1. And again, last one, what's the last combination? Consider the sides. Because for a cuboid, I hope you all recall, there's one cross section facing this way, one from bottom up, one from left to right. So you have to consider all scenarios to give you these notions over here. And therefore, simplifying it more, okay, it's just 1.92x squared plus 2.4x squared minus 2.4x. Okay, the rest is simplification, plus 1.6x squared minus 1.6. Simplifying it a little further, again, that's where you have 5.92x squared minus 4.8. So more or less, okay, this question seems straightforward, but the mistakes can be formed if it is a little bit too algebraic over here for you guys, okay? So just take note when we actually use the formulas, and because of how your total surface area of a cuboid can be quite long, and if your length, breadth, and height are different, when you multiply stuff, that's where all your errors comes in. So that's why I have 2, 3, and 4, and you have to be very clear on the different combinations for the cuboids. And when I mention 2, 3, and 4, it's just the options 2, options 3, options 4 over here. Okay, now next up, following up, finishing up in a while, what happens is, next part over here is just for you to see, given a scenario, how will we actually reduce a quadratic equation. So take note over here, from the previous part, we know this is the total surface area of the cube is greater than the total surface area of my cuboid by 10. So because cube is greater than cuboid by 10. So that's why we have this. Simplifying it up, the rest is just simplification. 1 mark for simplify. 1 mark for this statement. Okay, so how to get 3 marks? 1 mark for this statement, 1 mark to simplify to something equivalent, and 1 mark for the answer. Okay, and then next up, what happens with this statement? They will ask you to solve. So from solving, what happens is, in this case, why is it 3 marks? A step where required to show how you solve for the roots. So 1 mark to, in this case, show my quadratic equation. Negative b, in this case 50, plus minus square root over b squared, 50 squared, minus 4a. A, in this case, coefficient is 1. So that's why this is 1. C, in this case, so that's why in this case, C is minus 125. Okay, minus 125 over here. Okay, simplifying it further, that's where you get your answers. Apologies for that. This should have been simplified over here as well. Okay, so these are not my answers. Apologies for that. Let me just erase. And the actual answers are, in this case, once you have a quadratic formula, you can actually punch in your calculator to give you 2.3861, or in this case, negative 52.3 286. Again, simplifying it, that's where you have your answer. Okay, so the second mark comes into play when you have simplified to the intermediate answers. In this case, okay, this question is a little generous, before we round it to your 3SF. That's very important over here. Okay, remember to write 2, 3SF. And lastly, with regards to length, there's going to be a very interesting question that comes about in terms of length, which is the rudder notion over here. Okay, interesting question. Why one of the x values must be rejected? Okay, so in this case, we realize one is positive, one is negative. So what we can describe is that x is a length, and therefore we know that x cannot have a negative value. Very important. That's where they want to emphasize. That's where it's 1 mark. Length cannot have negative value. And the specific answer that must be rejected is actually x is equals to negative 52.4 must be rejected. Okay, so that's a notion down there of how we answer such a question, because if you refer, x is a length. For my previous part, I have two answers. One is negative, so therefore these are the things they are looking out for when we are rejecting our answers. Okay, or when we are phrasing why it must be rejected. Okay, with this notion here. Alright, so that is actually it for today. Thank you very much for everyone, and I leave you with this tip over here. You realize in paper 2, when you solve such questions, the paper tend to be a little bit, or the questions tend to be a little bit longer. So what we can do, we can break down the questions into smaller parts, okay, and see how we can use the previous information to help us in this case. So example, like the tree diagram, very simple. How can we use the tree diagram to help us? If in this case a diagram is provided as such in question 3, feel free to annotate, draw new lines, or label new vertices. So in this case, draw the angle and all the other relevant stuff that will help you. Alright, that is it for today. Thank you very much. Okay, so if you have any queries, feel free to ask. Otherwise, take care, stay safe. I'll see you all next week. Thank you everyone. This is Teacher Jason signing off. Alright, thank you everyone. Bye bye.